To many of us, Resident Evil 2 is the best sequel in Resident Evil franchise, taking the same approach as the original Resident Evil and improving it in every aspect, making it one of the most iconic Resident Evils out there. The original Resident Evil 2 was released back in 1998, introducing Leon as Kennedy, a rookie cop on his first day, and Claire Redfield, a student who is looking for her missing brother, as two main antagonists. Almost 20 years later, the game received a remake which changed the game in a lot of aspects. The first major difference has gotta be the camera perspective. Now with the modern graphics and improvements, the over-the-shoulder perspective would be the best, although the developers tried fixed camera angles as well. Resident Evil 2 Remake was released in 2019, being the first official remake after the release of the original remake, along the sequel Resident Evil 3. In this video we'll dive into Resident Evil 2 and we'll review it after 3 years to see if the word remake is proper for this game, or does it keep up to the recent games released, or is it generally a good game after all. I'm a Raccoon City survivor and this is Resident Evil 2 Remake or Reimagining. Resident Evil 2 Remake at its core is the same Resident Evil 2 from 1998 that we are all familiar with. Leon, the rookie cop who goes to Raccoon City for his first day, and Claire, a student who goes to Raccoon City to investigate on his brother's disappearance, Chris Redfield. Soon they both find out that this city is crowded with infected people who don't have control over themselves. They are all turned into zombies who won't go down unless killed, or even better, shot in head. The museum that is turned into a police department is not a normal department, as the two protagonists investigate. Soon they find a secret passage underneath the department which leads to an underground lab. The massive pharmaceutical company responsible for the mess in the city. They are the designer of the T-virus. The only two scientists left are Annette and William Birkin. William Birkin has created the G-virus, and there are two sides fighting to get their hands on G. Ada Wong, a mercenary, and Hunk and his team who had to extract the virus. The two protagonists managed to beat Birkin in different stages, and at the end, they both escaped the city with young Sherry Birkin just before the city's explosion. The story is the same in core, but there are some differences more or less. The A and B scenarios are here as well, which makes the game replayable, letting you literally play the same two scenarios as two individual characters. Though there are some weird moments in two different scenarios which don't even make sense, like Leon fighting G Stage 1 and defeating it, and Claire doing the same thing, though Leon just did it in a couple of minutes ago. The first scenario takes around 3 hours to complete, and the second scenario needs almost 2 hours. Considering the fact that you can play this game 4 different ways, it has to take you at least 10 hours to complete, which is decent, and extra modes are not included. As said earlier, the story is the same. You are still playing Resident Evil 2, but there are some differences to the story that you need to know. Firstly, Resident Evil 2 1998 went with a direct start, letting you start from the Raccoon City itself, right in the middle of fire and the crowd of zombies. Resident Evil 2 Remake, on the other hand, lets you start in a more relaxed way. It lets you start in the gas station, which you will learn the game's basics and mechanics, and this gas station is a recreation of the first cutscene from Resident Evil 2 1998. Originally, a zombie would have caused the car crash, but now, the driver that we saw earlier crashes his truck, which leads to a big explosion when luring the zombies towards the characters. Originally, you would have met Robert Kendo at the beginning, but now you meet him later on after exiting the RPD, and he won't get killed right away. And gotta say, the improvements done to him are great. He is now more believable thanks to the realistic looking motion capture animation and nicely done voice acting. Overall, there are some changes done to the game, and gotta be honest, the changes are done in favor of the game. Thanks to the 20 years graphical improvements, Now you can see dark corridors, scarier and more claustrophobic than ever. The reflections on the ground and the overall level design is crazy. Now you can find corridors blocked by objects that you have to move manually to clear out the way. Or you can also find big hallways crowded with zombies and lickers. Overall, Resident Evil 2 Remake does a great job of presenting the beloved original Resident Evil 2 1998, so that you still feel you're playing Resident Evil 2. Or does it? The first major difference noticed when playing Resident Evil 2 Remake is the change of the fixed camera angle to the much more modernized third-person view, which will lead to paying more attention to the details. Now we can shoot zombies at each part of their body: hands, shoulders, knees, head, and legs, compared to the auto-lock mechanism from 1998. Another major difference has gotta be the real-time rendered environment, unlike the pre-rendered background from the original. And now you can open and close doors and find yourself on the other side instead of seeing doors being open as loading screens. The gameplay is very interactive now, as the game introduces us to many new mechanics added, which makes it literally fun to play, like the additional knife mechanism, which is a combination of two sides of Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. You can use it to break crates or slash enemies with, or you can use it to break free when grabbed by a zombie, but you gotta know it'll decrease its durability, which will force you to finding a new weapon. The RPD is crowded with zombies as the police officers are all killed. Leon and Claire are the only human beings here, and to survive, they have to prevent zombies from crawling into the RPD, and this is where the new mechanic shows up. Around the RPD, you will come across planks scattered around. You can use them to barricade some of the windows in RPD that are broken through, so that you have less trouble fighting zombies. But you gotta know that there are a lot of broken windows in RPD, and you cannot barricade them all because there are only few planks to be found. Also, they take one inventory block, which is quite a lot at the very beginning. Speaking of inventory, in Resident Evil 2 Remake, we are once again presented with the same inventory system from Resident Evil 7, where you could stack weapons, healing items, and keys and ammunition. We also have the additional item box from the original Resident Evils, which come quite handy when you run out of space. Also, the in-game unlockables will appear in the item box. One of the things that almost all of Resident Evil games share are the healing items. They are mainly green and red, which will heal you different amounts. In Resident Evil 4, we had these yellow herbs which increase the maxed health limit. In Resident Evil 2 Remake though, we have these new blue herbs which not only clears poisonous effect, but also acts as a layer of protection for a decent amount of time, so that the blue herbs are not the least used herbs. Just like the original Resident Evil 2, Leon is equipped with his personal sidearm, VP-70, also known as the Matilda, a polymer handgun which uses 9mm parabellum rounds, and the same goes for Claire. When investigating RPD, you will come across some weapon parts that could be used as attachments, like extended magazine, stock, muzzle, and many more. Overall, the variety of the weapons provided in this game is insane. Handguns, shotguns, launchers, Colt revolvers, submachine guns, grenades, and miniguns. Resident Evil 2 Remake does a great job of balancing horror and action, so that it is never frustrating or never action-packed like Resident Evil 6. One of the key elements in this topic are the puzzles. In this game, there are a bunch of well-designed puzzles that could be hard to solve sometimes. Overall, there are some decent amount of cleverly designed puzzles that some could be solved and some could be skipped, with one of the most clever ones being these small lockers that you have to find a new pattern in each playthrough, which means it is randomized and you cannot memorize it to speedrun the game or something. And it will grant you the buttons to unlock the other side of the locker room. The Raccoon police department itself feels like a puzzle too, with different rooms all over the place that you have to memorize them. Cause like the original, you're gonna be having a lot of going back and forth. In addition to that, some of the doors are locked with signature keys that you have to find them as you progress. And also the traditional phrase, "it's locked from the otall side," is here as well. Overall, this game is not just a struggle to survive, it is a nicely designed puzzle too. One of the things that helps Resident Evil 2 Remake stand out is the super realistic looking models in this game. Everything just looks so real. Even a burger. You will also notice this when you come across zombies. They are highly detailed and they move so realistically creepy. Everything they do is based on real life. And just like the original where you could split zombies in half with shotgun, you can shoot zombies in each part of their body so that the organs will fall apart. Hands, legs, even splitting them in half. But the thing that I went for most of the time was the head. And gotta say, paying this much attention to small details is really respectable. Lickers are one of the most iconic creatures in the franchise that were firstly introduced in Resident Evil 2 1998. They are present in the remake too, but with a small difference in introduction. They are super responsive to your footsteps, so you have to be quiet when near them, because once you're detected, they can deal you lots of damage. And finally, controversial Mr. X, the second stalker enemy in recent Resident Evil games after Jack Baker. Unlike the original, Mr. X shows up in both scenarios. The first one, when you're trying to return to RPD from the crash site, and the second one when you're trying to go to RPD from the parking. Back in the days, it was a huge deal to have an enemy who is a stalker. And now Resident Evil 2 Remake went even further. Now Mr. X responds like a real human, which means he sees and listens, meaning you won't be detected if not in his sight and if you don't make noise. Noises are mainly gunshots, footsteps, and opening and closing doors. And the final thing are the outfits, which are more believable now. Leon starts the game with a more casual clothes and he changes to special uniform when he reaches the RPD. And the outfit itself has changed a little bit to make it more realistic, and also the same goes for Claire. After Resident Evil 6, Capcom started developing a new engine and stopped working on the previous one, Empty Framework. The new engine is called RE, which stands for Reach for the Moon, and Resident Evil 7 was the first game to ever be developed on this game. And this engine is overally a high-quality engine with insane lighting effects. Resident Evil 2 Remake was also developed on this engine, and this is why this game looks incredibly believable and beautiful. In early stages of development, developers wanted to approach the remake like what they did with Resident Evil 1, a scene-by-scene remake that has no cut content and instead adds some, also with the fixed camera angles and real-time rendered backgrounds. But at the end they went with the third-person view. One thing that makes Resident Evil 2 Remake super realistic is the photogrammetry, which is basically taking photos from different angles from an object and turning it into a 3D model. They have been doing this since the release of Resident Evil 7, and they also do motion capture for everyone, also for zombies, and that is why they look so realistic. And at the end I have to mention how good the lighting is. You will feel this especially in the dark corridors, where you firstly meet the first victim of the liquor. Everything about Resident Evil 2 Remake is impressive and has been executed perfectly. After the fairly 10 hours gameplay, you can check the extra modes, where they had a really clever idea of telling the story of the side characters. Firstly, Hunk has to escape the city and starts from the sewers and has to get to the RPD's gate. And next we have other survivors, and the most important one being Robert Kendo. His story is rewritten and he does not die at the very beginning, and he actually manages to escape the city just in time. And there are other survivors as well, like a member of Hunk's team, a sheriff, and a girl from the orphanage. One thing that disappointed me was microtransactions. You have to pay to get the original soundtracks and sound effects, which for a remake is definitely not proper. Generally, Resident Evil 2 Remake has quite the mixed reviews. Some saying it's a true experience of Resident Evil 2 and some say it's definitely not. But for the majority, I believe it is a nice game, and if you ask me, this game is in my top 3 favorite Resident Evil games. Just seeing those creepy zombies and me struggling to land a shot on their head feels incredible. This game feels rewarding and punishing at the same time. Not in a Dark Souls fashion though, it follows Resident Evil 2's method of survival horror, where you have limited supplies and you have to think carefully about your ammunition. So, that'll do it for Resident Evil 2 Remake 2019. Let me know what you guys think about this game. Do you believe the word remake is proper for this game? If you do, let us know your thoughts down in the comment section. And if you have come so far and enjoyed this video, then please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'm a Raccoon City survivor, and as always, thanks for watching.